was a judge here at QuiltCon this year. And so before we go into the judging part, tell us a little bit about yourself and your history as a quilter and a teacher and educator.
Okay, so I am originally from New York. I am a graduate from Parsons School of Design. I studied illustration, and upon graduation I did freelance work for a little while. And then once it was hard living off freelance, you know?
Right.
So I did what a lot of artists do, which is I just got a job that was not in my field, which I absolutely hated, while trying to create on the side, which was a little difficult. I had to give my studio up, which was a huge impetus for buying a sewing machine, because I was no longer doing these huge paintings. Now I wanted to kind of work in a more controlled medium, or so I thought at the time, that it would be a more controlled medium, like tiny little things. So I bought a sewing, well, first I picked up Denise Schmidt's book, which I'm going to talk about a little bit in my lecture on the history of improv, how I picked that book up, her first one, Denise Schmidt Quilts, and how it was kind of life-changing for me, because it completely changed how I thought about quilts, and it made me realize that, hey, you know, these are art, like your grandmother's quilt is art, and it made me really just start thinking of fabric as a medium. And so with that, I started making quilts. And then once I moved up here to Boston, so I moved up to Cambridge. I moved up to Cambridge in 2006, I think, because my husband's mom was ailing and we wanted to be near his family. And so that brought me to Gather Here. So Gather Here, which is a shop, it's a local, it's a fabric and yarn shop in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and they actually just turned 14 this weekend. Wow. So they've been around for 14 years, and I started working there, not even a year into them opening, maybe about a year into them opening.
So were you doing, because you come from Parsons School of Design background, were you doing clothing instruction as well as quilting, or you were doing sort of a little bit of both?
Well, the funny thing is that I used to make toys.
Oh.
And so they initially hired me to teach quilting and toy making, you know, plushie making.
Right.
And then eventually I started teaching sewing basics, teaching people who were completely new to sewing how to make a tote bag, how to make little projects like pencil pouches and things like that.
Yeah, like the skirt that you did in home economics.
Yes, exactly.
That kind of thing.
Teaching people how to make pajama pants.
Right.
So that was another class that I taught. And so, and lots of quilting classes, of course. And so I taught there for almost 11 years. And I think COVID, teaching post-COVID kind of burnt me out because I was doing a lot of like hybrid classes, and I think like that just didn't jive with my ADHD, because it was really tricky to try to like answer questions as they were coming up from people at home, as well as helping people in person, some of whom had never used a machine before. And so just trying to juggle the two, I think it broke my brain. So but yeah, that's how I came into quilting and teaching, and
you stayed kind of in that modern world.
Yes.
Okay, and then now you've been doing that for many years. And so how did you get chosen to be a judge here at QuiltCon?
I think, honestly, I'm not sure. I don't know, but if my theory is that it's a combination of a few things. First, of the three judges, we had Allison Glass, who is primarily involved in textiles, fabric design, quilt design. You know, she's done that for so many years. And then Tammy Rubin, who is an artist. She's a 3D artist. She does ceramics and installations and multimedia kind of work. And she teaches. She's a professor in Texas. And so, because they had someone from the quilt world and someone from the art world, then they decided to choose me because I kind of straddle the line between the two. And so I think like that had a lot to do with it, as well as my teaching experience. And
that sounds...
I've taught at QuiltCon, I've taught at 1, 2, 3. So I did QuiltCon in Phoenix was my first one. I think that was 2020. That was the first one that I taught at. I taught for the virtual QuiltCon 2021. And then I also taught at Raleigh last year and now this year here. So I think that that kind of experience
Right, helped a lot.
Helped a lot,
Helped a lot.
yeah.
So we know that there are the three judges.
Yes.
And one of the thoughts we had was, when selecting the judge's choice, how is that, how do you as a judge determine that? And determine from the whole pool of quilts that have been selected, the one that you wanna choose?
It was extremely difficult.
Yeah.
Because there were so many amazing quilts. And for that category, that was the one category where there was no criteria other than what you personally liked.
Right.
And so there were two quilts that I was deliberating between. It was so difficult for me to choose between them both because I love them both, but for different reasons.
Right.
And the one that I chose, that one was by an improv artist, Emily Trahan. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, so I apologize, Emily, if I'm not saying this right. But her work is just phenomenal, and it just spoke to me on a visceral level. Like,
Right.
when I saw it, I literally got chills.
Right, and I imagine it's very much like, let's say, you compare it to students who are applying to go to college.
Mhm.
And they've been in a class and everybody in the class makes a 4.0, and now we're trying to apply, and how do we make ourselves stand apart from all the other 4.0 students? I would
Exactly.
imagine it's somewhat on the same level. The skill
Yes.
level is there, the design,
Yes.
everything was there, and now it comes down to, well, which one, as you said, you reacted to on a visceral level.
Yes.
Yes, and so as judges also, is there particular things that you're keeping in mind as far as criteria with the different categories when you're looking at the various categories that are within the show?
Yes, so when we're looking at the various categories, there's actually a list of criteria that we're looking for.
Okay.
And so there's a definition for each category. We have to look at each quilt objectively as like how they interpret that category. Are they meeting the criteria? Are they doing X, Y, and Z and actually fulfilling this? Like, there were some quilts that were phenomenal, but they were entered into one category or another, and they just didn't quite meet the criteria of that category, which was like, it felt criminal saying no to these quilts.
Yeah.
Because they're just stunning, stunning pieces, but they just didn't check those boxes.
So
for
is that
us.
something that people who are considering entering a quilt, that they really need to study what the criteria is for that category?
Yes.
When they're trying to decide, do I wanna go into this category, that it's really important to read that fine print?
That is correct.
Okay, that's good to know, then, as far as, that's what judges are looking for, so if you aren't ticking all the boxes, maybe you should look at a different category?
Yes. I think that one thing that people need to do is to not just be very honest with themselves about where they see this piece going, but they also should maybe consult a friend or consult someone else. Because there are just some quilts that I felt were just like,
They were close.
They were close, but not quite, and I felt like they were misplaced. Like, they probably would have done a lot better, or they probably would have won a prize had they been in a different category.
Okay, oh, that's a great tip to hear from a judge, that
Yeah.
really read that fine print about what they're looking for in that category.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other tips from the judge's perspective?
I think that this year, in terms of minimalist design, we really went with like the art school definition of what defines minimalism. And
Yeah.
so I think that Tammy really led our group with that. So, we made some decisions that I think might upset people, but I stand by those choices. So.
Right. Well, I think this is great. It's always, you never know from the viewer's perspective, well, what were the judges thinking about, X particular quilt when they were looking at it, and you think, oh, this is great, and we love this, but why didn't they choose this for a winner? But as you said, there's a lot of sort of nuance that goes into the decision-making of the judges.
It was very nuanced, and there were so many quilts where it was like, we debated them, we talked about them at length, because we were just not quite sure, because they were just stunning. They were really well done. They were technically masterful and, visually striking, but they just did not quite meet the criteria of the category, or they met the criteria, but there was another quilt that met it a little bit more successfully, or that we felt was more compelling in that category.
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful show. There's a lot of amazing quilts out there. And so
There
thank you
really
very
is.
much for giving us a little bit more insight
Thank
into what people could achieve, you know,
Yes.
what the goals that they can set for themselves
Yes.
in the show. So thank you again for stopping by and
My pleasure.
taking time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yes.